January 6th continues to be a top of mind in your government. What does that indicate about your government's priorities? Imagine if your government cared as much about the dramatic decline in American quality of life right now, half as much as they care about the decline in quality of security on Capitol Hill. The obsession over January 6th not only shows how self-involved our government has become, far more concerned with its own agenda than the American people, it also shows an obsession over Donald Trump that won't be allowed to die until his political ambition does. As long as Trump flirts with 2024, he will be the focus of congressional inquiries and the top story on CNN. Democrats claim Steve Bannon and 3 other Trump associates, including former National Security aide Kash Patel, have information about exactly what the president was doing on January 6th during this riot. The truth is, the committee isn't just looking for that answer, though. It's fishing to get anything that it can weaponize, obviously, which is why subpoenas always get fought. Trump has sued the committee and the National Archives. In the filing, Trump's team calling it a vexatious, illegal fishing expedition. His legal team argues the committee's request for documents is so broad that it's unconstitutional and there is no legitimate legislative purpose for the pursuit of these documents. Last week, the president, Biden, broke precedent and rejected Trump's assertion of executive privilege, something that could come back to haunt old Joe, as we know that he and Hunter's closets are nice and full of skeletons. And as for the media,
and this was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
The assault that was made on our democracy today.
They hunted us at the Capitol. It was an insurrection. It was an act of terror.
It's honestly so funny when you look back with the information we now have about that day. Nobody was armed, waltzing around inside, taking pictures, not beating cops with fire extinguishers. How many fake narratives have been blown apart with all the video we've now seen? So what was January 6th really? Well, we all know that Trump was angry after the election. He felt slighted as the entire political, corporate, and media machine kicked into overdrive to forcibly remove him from office. Yes, that's what it really took. Don't believe for a second it was just Joe Biden beating Trump. It was a massive collusion of the most powerful entities in the country, all uniting around an incredible fear and anger toward populism, and a populace demanding more from its government. The January 6th rally, which is how this all started on Capitol Hill, was of course coordinated by Trump and his supporters. The president spoke there. It was meant to send a message to Washington. But as we played for you about 1 million times, the day saw thousands of unarmed Trump supporters who were told by their president to march peacefully and patriotically and make their voices heard. Now, the escalation of what happened after was a horrible turn of events. But on what planet could you actually say that the president tried to incite an insurrection of the U.S. government by telling unarmed people to march peacefully and patriotically? If this legal fishing expedition sounds familiar to you, that's because it is the latest version of the Democrats' Russia collusion narrative. Throw everything at the wall, make all the outlandish accusations you want, and see what sticks. A new obsession for Democrats and, of course, their allies in the press. Russia, 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 turning into insurrection, insurrection, insurrection. But even after Russia fell apart in such an incredible display of media malpractice, ABC News is breathing new life into the collusion narrative, giving British spy Christopher Steele a 1-hour special. The spy who promised Trump was corrupted by Russia, who tried to convince the media to report on it before we all found out that he was hired by Hillary Clinton to destroy Trump. The greatest irony of all in this, the allegation of Trump-Russia collusion brought to you courtesy of Hillary Clinton, who colluded with a foreign spy who was using Russian sources. The ultimate pot kettle story, isn't it? And ABC is not quite done with Christopher Steele yet, releasing Out of the Shadows, the man behind the Steele dossier. ABC's George Stephanopoulos sitting down with Steele, re-examining it all. The documentary also features other ABC reporters like Martha Raddatz, who was aghast. Take a look.
People were whispering about Donald Trump and his affinity for Vladimir Putin. Then he comes right out and asks Russia to help him.
Completely astounded that Trump would ask Russians to find emails that Hillary Clinton destroyed by smashing and acid washing laptop computers and cell phones. But with naturally, of course, zero interest whatsoever in the insane story of the destruction of the emails themselves. or why they were so aggressively destroyed in the first place. The State Department is supposed to have access to all of Hillary Clinton's work emails, but about half of them, about half, were violently destroyed. 30,000 of them acid washed, smashed with hammers. Can you imagine? They freak out because Trump asked Russia to find these emails. Nobody seems to care that the former Secretary of State is smashing and acid washing things that belong to the State Department. As far as the outrage over Trump's campaign welcoming outside help, which obviously didn't look good, but for those of us in the real world, name one political campaign ever that wouldn't take any help it could get to win. Really. Politics is the most disgusting game in the world. You know that. Democrats are better than anyone at bending and breaking the rules. Just look at the last election. Anything to win. They will do anything to win. Either side would do anything to win. Look at what's at stake. For his part, Christopher Steele, the highly credible former MI6 agent turned intelligence salesman, showed his cards, revealing in truth he was nothing more than a paid political hitman working for Hillary Clinton by flying to D.C. to try and shove his Russian dossier right down the throats of the American media.
You fly to D.C. because you've decided to have off-the-record meetings with journalists at the Tavern Inn.
Mm-hmm. Fusion wanted an off-the-record briefing for journalists to stimulate them into looking into the issues.
He has a nice way of saying that. Fusion wanted Hillary Clinton wanted me to come to the United States and try to take all the information that I have gotten from my Russian asset friends and try to shove it down the media's throat so they can destroy Donald Trump. That's what he meant to say. It's not exactly how it came out. He's a smooth talker. He's James Bond, right? MI6. In the end, it was a failed mission for Christopher Steele, though, as seen here.
It was being shopped all over the place. And everyone to whom the dossier was shared sent reporters out, tried to confirm the basic allegations within it. And it never got any traction because no one could nail anything in it down.
That's a problem. The move to shop the dossier crushed the credibility of Steele, and they cut FBI ties with him. The FBI cut their ties to Christopher Steele. In the end, the Mueller report found the Russians were active in the 2016 election, but found no evidence the Trump campaign actually colluded with them. A major disappointment, of course, to the mainstream press and Democrats, be they one in the same. The Steele dossier was also eviscerated by the Michael Horowitz Inspector General report as well. But of course, Christopher Steele, who refutes the findings of the FBI, naturally continues to push his agenda as Trump now eyes 2024. All, of course, in the face of pesky reality, though. This NPR article lays out the case that Trump was, in fact, the toughest president on Russia in the Cold War era, post-Cold War era, I should say. Quoting Daniel Valdich from the Atlantic Council, when you actually look at the substance of what this administration has done, talking about Trump's, not the rhetoric, but the substance, this administration has been much tougher on Russia than any in the post-Cold War era. Yes, this is the president that was in the pocket of Vladimir Putin. It's too good. NPR, which hates Trump, even forced to admit that. Obviously, ABC did not bring that up in their reporting. They had a full hour to do it. They didn't bring it up. Just using a quote from Christopher Steele alleging that Russia was very satisfied with what they got out of Trump, a quote that makes no sense. That's why Russia didn't release the damaging videotapes they hold over Trump. Yeah, or maybe those tapes don't really exist, and maybe Trump isn't a Russian asset. Just a thought.